Yeah, we've been doing classes via Zoom since COVID started, since lockdown started, but it's my first time recording, so hopefully this works. So I think it's pretty awesome that we're having a conversation right now, given we didn't really know each other a couple of months ago pre-COVID. Right?
Yeah, that's true. No, that's
So
true.
I think there's always a blessing in, there is a silver lining with this time. It helps us to still, technology helps us to still connect with people.
For sure.
And Jiu-Jitsu helps us to continue to connect with people. Yay, Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes, literally our only window out to the world right now, right?
I know. Yeah. Totally. But it's as long as people are getting on, there's still tons of ways to stay socially connected, right?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Keep moving and learning and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're doing so you're still doing, your line of work is physiotherapy. Yes.
I'm in sport therapy. So it's like athletic therapy, but orthopedic sports massage as well. So it's a blend of both.
Okay.
And yeah, I was doing it for the first few weeks. And then, because I had a team, we have a team at Bandage Jiu Jitsu is the name of the group. And we operate out of the northeast, so pretty close to the downtown. You know where Peter's Drive-In is? So we're about a block away from Peter's Drive-In, very close to downtown.
Oh, okay. So actually, that's not far.
Yeah, there's a team of therapists there. So we have an in-house physio, we have a sports massage therapist that I'm training him on the orthopedic side of things. There's myself. We have a student that comes in, and then we have a satellite physiotherapist in Marta Loop as well. So I'm the lead therapist. So I go around and do collaborations with like clubs such as yourself, just to spread the word. Because we primarily treat wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and Muay Thai injuries.
Yeah, I think that's really cool that you've made that your focus.
Yeah, and I mean, we can do that because a lot of our therapists have been in the game for 20 plus years, right? So this isn't their primary source of income. They have their own clinics and studios. We just collaborated because everybody has something for jiu-jitsu or wrestling or whatever.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. Well, that's kind of how you and I connected too, right? Through jiu-jitsu, even though we're at different clubs. We didn't know each other before this. So I think that's so cool that we've connected, and then jiu-jitsu is kind of the underlying, and injuries. Talking about injuries and how to not be injured, and just longevity of the sport because we love it so much, right? So, but that's cool. I'm happy to hear that you can still do your work via Zoom because so many people are affected right now. So I'm sure it's not the same. I've been doing
no, for sure.
Things via Zoom too. It's not the same, but it's the best that we can do, right?
Yeah. I did a poll on Instagram there last week, and I said, how many people are going to come out of the quarantine with the same injuries that they went into quarantine with? And I thought I was the only one, and 3/4 of the respondents were agreeing. They were saying, yes, I still have the stubborn injury. And I was scratching my head, and I said, we're going into the second month, and this is when collagen fibers mature. That's past the functional part of rehabilitation. That's when structures start to, if rehab properly, they start to strengthen, and should be taking the tape off and get rid of all these crutches, but everybody's still injured. And I think it's because people aren't looking after injuries as well as they were while they were practicing jiu-jitsu. I think they're realizing they weren't using their bodies and going through the movements. They didn't have to rehab. But no, I was glad to hear that I wasn't the only one. Right? Yeah,
well, there's the approach of, okay, maybe I'm being too active, I'm overactive, maybe I'm training too much and I'm not taking care of my injuries, or not taping or doing the things, being proactive with your activity levels and doing that kind of thing. And then there's also another side of it where maybe people aren't being active at all right now, because there's definitely a percentage of people that aren't keeping as busy as they were before, and then thinking maybe just time is going to heal their injuries without putting in.
For sure. Yeah, I can see that.
Like, there's a lot of categories in there for sure, right?
Yeah.
I know for myself, I have a lot of nagging injuries. I've been trying to utilize this time to heal as well. Yeah.
Cool.
So do you want to go into it? So we had this conversation at the beginning when we first met about fingers, right? So everybody who does jiu-jitsu knows that our fingers can take a beating in jiu-jitsu if we're not, like, depends on how often you train and all that, right? But for longevity of the sport, we should definitely be taping our fingers. So what do you have to share with us?
Well, for the primary focus, for sure, would be finger sprains. Okay, so I know we've talked about this previously. There's numerous conditions that can happen to the hands when we're training. They're overused, and this is piggybacked with the fact that we use our hands on a daily basis, from driving to typing to holding your children to holding utensils while you're eating. So they're constantly getting used, right? Used and abused is what I like to say. And nobody really looks after their hands until they sustain an injury, right? So you can sustain many injuries to the hands. Today, we're going to focus on ligament sprains, and these typically happen on the medial or lateral sides of the hands or the fingers. So just on the inside here, they can happen to either side, okay? There are conditions that happen on the insides of the hands here, just on the inside or in the middle, okay? Those are a lot more serious, and they will sometimes require surgical interventions, okay? You will have to see your doctor for that. They usually have to perform surgeries on those types of tendon ruptures, or something happens to the tendinous sheath. Again, all of these, the muscles in the forearms that cross the forearm, we find that the injuries that people sustain, they take longer to get over if the people have poor mobility or flexibility in the wrist. Okay, if they have a lot of tight muscles in the forearms, on the front side or the back side of the forearms, and especially if they're using their hands for their occupation. Okay, so they have the tight muscles in the wrist, poor mobility and flexibility in the wrist, and they're using their hands a lot, and they go to jiu-jitsu and they injure themselves. They injure themselves on the mat, okay, then they have to go back to work, and it creates a perpetuating factor, right? So it's taken them longer to get out of this, to the state of injury. So today's focus, we're going to focus on the ligaments. Again, sprain is characterized or defined as the ligament being stretched beyond its capabilities to resist. Okay, so the ligament's job is to stop bones or joints from going in undesired planes. Okay, ligaments attach a bone to bone. For the symptom picture, how do you know this happens? Because the severity is different, right, with different people. You can start experiencing heat in the joint. It starts to feel hot, right? For some people, including myself, at points it was itchy at first. I wasn't sure what it was. The joint was really itchy. If you haven't identified it and you haven't protected your fingers with tape, and you start to roll, it starts to feel raw, like painful, overworked at the beginning, middle, and even at the end of a practice without tape. Okay. What else? Things to look out for. Pain and stiffness. Okay, so the next day you'll feel pain, and it's very local, right where the knuckle bends on either side. Okay. Stiff in the morning and painful at night. I try to explain to people as well that we use tape only as an adjunct to rehab. Okay, flexibility, mobility, that's hugely important. Although there's a number of people out there that start to rely on this. And what happens with this is the structures never really heal properly. Once you start to tape, your body starts to rely on the tape, okay, as a crutch.
That's interesting. I have a question then for you on that, because, well, like we talked about before, I never used to tape my fingers, like ever. And then when I went to Brazil, and I was training like, multiple times a day, that's when I really wrecked my fingers.
Oh, wow.
Overtraining, that's when it started. But then I still was stubborn and I didn't tape my fingers, but also I was taping them incorrectly, which is why I think this is an important conversation to have, because I think there's some people that don't tape their fingers. No, they should be. There's some people that are taping their fingers, aren't doing it properly, right? And so it's good I taped them incorrectly when I finally started and decided to start taping. I was doing it incorrectly. What was my, oh yeah, so you're saying that, you know, we don't want to become reliant on the tape, but then there's some of us who, well, a lot of us, that train on a regular basis and feel the aftermath of that training or of that overtraining, and we are taping our fingers every time to be proactive. So what are your thoughts on that? On, okay, maybe I didn't sustain that I know of. There wasn't an incident where I sprained this finger and I know I need to rehab it and fix it up with, you know, by using the tape, but that I want to continue to tape my fingers as a way of not injuring myself. So what are your thoughts on that, if, you know, with what you're saying on not being
I think it's a great idea for preventative reasons as well, because there's a lot of techniques, like, you know this well, there's a lot of techniques that we'll go through, especially at the beginning levels of jiu-jitsu, and you can have your white belt for many years, right? And for example, the spider guard technique is a nasty one. It's an amazing way to manipulate your client. I've seen 16-year-old girls manipulate big 40-year-old men with the technique, but it's dangerous because it leaves your fingers in this precarious position, right? And the joint isn't very strong.
I seem to love all the techniques that involve hard work for my fingers. Those are the ones I seem to gravitate to. Now that I've been in it for a bit longer now and my fingers are feeling it, I've been challenging myself to work other kinds of grips. But I love spider guard.
It's great, like seeing what it can do to, you know, like you see a child or a teenager defend off a full-grown man. It's amazing, but you got to be careful, right? Especially when you start sparring, and if you don't really know who your partner is, and they just have an utter disregard for you, they'll start taking your fingers and start pulling them away from the gi, right? And
that's a whole nother conversation.
yeah. So no, taping for, like, if you know going in, if you have the time, like time permitting, going in and you talk to your professor about what techniques you guys are going to go over, you know, before class starts, quickly tape your fingers up. There's nothing wrong with that, because it's worse if you sustain an injury and you're having to tape to protect the injury as opposed to, right?
Exactly. I know it's tedious. Like for me, when I first started doing it, I wasn't consistent doing it at all, because it is tedious, and especially life of a mom. I'm always, well, maybe not all moms, but lateness, you know, when I'm a participant in class, you know, not having time to tape my fingers. But when I started to become consistent doing it is when I noticed, wow, this actually works really well. So
you have to be proactive and take time. I encounter a lot of people. So we don't only train the athletes at our club. I treat athletes citywide because of we specialize in the jiu-jitsu populations. And I tell them, if you're over 30 years old, even like 25, after 25 years old, if you want to engage in a physically demanding sports such as jiu-jitsu, I still have yet to meet somebody that watches TV all day or goes to work and then goes to jiu-jitsu. Everybody's doing something. Everybody's doing yoga or strength training or cycling, swimming, or running in conjunction with jiu-jitsu. And it forces them to stay on top of the rehab game or prehab game. And I say, listen, just as you get older, the physiological process of the body, it starts to break down. Nobody can change that. Tissues start to dry out, you lose flexibility, you lose your mobility, you lose your balance. Everything starts to happen like that, right? It's just the physical life, human life. And I said, if you want to do jiu-jitsu and you don't want sore fingers, you have to tape them up, okay? And I think the look on their faces, a lot of them, they don't like the idea. And I tell them, it's not forever. You just have to get out of the state of injury, which is 4 to 8 weeks. Usually about 8 weeks is when those fibers start to mature on the sides. And after that, and if you're rehabbing and not injuring in that 8 weeks, you can take the tape off. Your hands are good again, right? It's the guys that don't tape their fingers because they're running late, or they feel good. The fingers feel good after 3 weeks and they don't think it's there, and then they re-injure it again. And things can go sideways really quick.
Yeah, this is a good time to have this conversation as well. We're, you know, at home and maybe not training at the highest level that we normally do. Is remembering this for when we go back.
Yeah, yeah. So no, maybe you're right. Maybe it's a great time. People just start wearing tape around the fingers, right? Because we can easily go from like the very mild sprain, grade 1 sprain, which is less than 10% of the fibers, the ligament fibers, to complete ruptures or like avulsion fractures, right? Those are the things that can happen when you sustain an injury to the ligament, and then you fail to tape it because it just feels okay one day, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I definitely noticed it. It was like black and white, to be honest. Like when I was consistent. So like so many things, the more consistent you are, obviously that's when you're going to notice differences or results. But when it came, it wasn't necessarily during. It wasn't during. I didn't notice it during, and so I questioned whether it was working. But it was after, or the next day, that I realized, wow, my hands feel different.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, do you want to show us what to do?
Sure. Yeah. I'll go over a quick taping instruction here. Okay, so I'm going to show you on the 2 most affected fingers. Okay, and those are the last 2. So we call them digits 4 and 5, the ring and the pinky fingers. There's a rule of thumb. So when these fingers are injured, you're never to tape them together. Okay.
Okay.
Why are these fingers injured more commonly? Well, if you were to make a fist as hard as you can, okay, look at my fist. And if you were to look at the orientation of the knuckles, do you see that?
Yeah.
They're not straight because the anatomical disposition of these, look at that. They have the ability to flex. So this nerve, the nerve that innervates the muscles of this hand, and the given anatomical positioning, they're able to flex a lot further than these. So when you grab onto somebody's D, these fingers that act like a hook are usually the ones that are still, once these are ripped off, these last 2 fingers are the 2 that go into any direction, and you start to overstretch the ligaments on the inside or the outside of them, right?
Excuse me.
Yeah, so these are the 2 most often injured fingers. Do they not happen in people? Yes, I've seen people with that do a lot of pistol gripping with the index finger, sometimes the thumb, middle finger. But soon after those fingers, since they're already weakened and they're the stronger ones, these ones always follow suit. Usually starts with these 2 though. Okay, so that's one rule. You never take them together.
That's a good thing to know. Everyone
Okay, another rule of thumb is I like to use a single strip. Okay, I like to use a single strip and create what we call like a spiral taping line. The advantages of the spiral taping line is you get even tension up and down, and it creates as a cross brace, okay, in the front or the back of the knuckle, okay? And that's important because relative to taping circles around the joints itself, it's hard to get even tension on both circles, right? So when you make a fist after an hour's practice, however long you practice, one of them is going to unravel, and I've seen guys do it. After one unravels, they just take the tape off, and they're just limiting their increasing their exposure to re-injury again, right? Because of the frustrations. So that's one. And number 2, I find it's a good way to avoid other injuries that can happen to the inside of the palm of the hand, okay? So the tendons of the hand. So you take 1 strip, okay? And here we'll start digit 4, and we're gonna come across, upwards, okay? Towards that middle joint. And we're still spiraling upwards, okay? So we're spiraling across the back, upwards to the distal joint, around the distal joint, and then we're gonna spiral downwards again. I'll show you the finished product after. Around the joint, around the back to where you started, back to the base, okay? So I like to go around the joint because of the ligament structure. It's very small, okay? And it's, like I said, its function is to attach bone to bone. And to go over it, you're getting more of a protective impact as opposed to going just above and just below it, okay, for one reason. Another reason is this something we call the gate control theory. If you put a piece of athletic tape just above and just below, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're protecting it.
Yeah.
What happens when you put tape onto the skin or on top of an injury is the brain realizes it's there, and because it doesn't present any danger to that area, it sends a signal to the nervous system to shut off all pain. Okay, so that's classified as the gate control theory. You guys can look that up yourselves, and that just goes for anywhere in the body, not just the fingers. Okay, so I like to tape over the joint, and it's very important that when you apply these taping methods, we're not squeezing the circulation out of them. Okay, you should be able to match up the tips of your fingers, and they shouldn't be turning blue or purple. Okay, another way is the capillary refill test. You want to make sure that blood is getting into the tips of the fingers. So when I release this, it'll be white, but only for a split second, and then the blood gets back in there. Okay, you've got a whole nother can of worms if you start cutting off the circulation. So it's recommended that when you apply this tape, that the fingers are slightly bent. Okay. Or you can put the tape on straight and just bend as you go along. Okay. Another great thing about the spiral application is when you flex your knuckles, it increases the tensile strength. Okay, you'll feel it. It feels great. It feels great on the knuckles and the joints. Did you have a question?
That's a lot quicker. That's a lot. It's a much quicker method as well, because our other conversation around taping above and below, right? That can take time, and for those that find it extremely tedious to do in the first place, this is a nice way to make it faster.
For sure. So are you using this method?
I'm not, no. Previously, when I had taped on the joint, when I was doing it incorrectly and then decided I wasn't going to tape my fingers at all because it didn't make a difference, it actually made my fingers feel worse. I was taping on the joint itself, which I've had many conversations with people since that time who do the same thing, and they're like, do you even find it works? And I shared my experience and said I used to tape right on it, but I wasn't doing the spiral, so it didn't work for me. It made my fingers feel worse, actually. And then I started taping above and below, and it takes so long, but also making the cross. And I found that worked really well for me. But I'm really excited to try your method because, again, it already is tedious. It takes so much time. And so to rip into pieces and to just be able to use one long piece, I'm looking forward to trying it that way.
Yeah. It works well. Yeah, you should give it a shot.
And something else that you mentioned too is like, because it's a good, you mentioned there are so many different hand injury conditions, right? Obviously, there's so many different things that can happen to the hand, but this is a good kind of universal way to tape all your fingers, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's a good thing to note. Yeah. Okay, well, do you have anything else to add? Like, so basically Sam and I have made separate videos so that it's easy for all of you to look and just move through and see different ways of tape. Well, not different ways of taping, but like showing again the way that you taped the fingers there. So it's a little bit more easy to see without having to go through our whole conversation here. And then I also did some taping as well and showed some stretches. So those of you who don't know, I'm a yoga teacher as well. And yin is my area of focus. So that's my jam. I like yin yoga, and I didn't always like yin yoga. When I was younger, I found it really boring, and I actually hated doing it. I preferred things that like made me sweat a lot, and things that were fast and hard. And yin yoga was not appealing to me at all. But as I've gotten older, I've noticed that I need that. I need the slow, and also for injuries, not getting injured, the restorative nature of it. So if you're not already doing yoga, I would suggest to do it. I found that the little bit of stretching that I was doing before class wasn't enough. And so having the practice of stretching before class and having the practice of stretching after class is going to improve, again, your longevity in the sport. And
sure.
I taped just some finger stretches since we're on the topic of fingers, things that you can do for your fingers and your wrists. And And then I also recorded a technique, a Jiu Jitsu technique that saves your fingers, because like I mentioned before, I love chokes, I love lapel grips, I love lapel chokes, but sometimes the fingers just need a break. So I recorded a technique that I really, really like, that's super effective, but also saves your fingers.
Excellent. That's great.
Yeah, so people that are tuning in, you can just swipe, right? We're going to share it in that style where you can just swipe and then see the other videos that we recorded in just shorter segments.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah. You have anything else that you want to add? Anything?
I think it's pretty much covered. That is it. That is it.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing the taping with us. It was nice chatting with you.
No worries. Yeah, glad to help. Always glad to help the jiu-jitsu population, for sure.
Yeah, we gotta stick together this time, hey?
Yeah, for sure.
It's a really interesting time for all of us, and the jiu-jitsu community is feeling it for sure. So many people are feeling it, but you know, we're in a unique sport.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you know, I'm really looking forward to getting back to the mats with everybody else.
Yeah, me too. Just hopefully soon, though.
Yeah, hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Okay, Sam. Well, it was nice chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Yes, thanks for your time.
Yeah. Enjoy your day.
Glad to help. Yeah, take care.
Okay, see you.
All right, see you. Bye.
Bye.